Good Friday afternoon. I know some of you must be tired and looking forward to the weekend. I know I am. I just wanted to make sure I responded to my section of the class, 610B on entertainment education, and just responded a little bit to some of the questions and responses to those questions that you offered. Let me just say, I really encouraging that to me to read the responses because so many of them were so very good. This week it was just hard to pick what I considered some of the best responses were, and I just felt that it was very rich and many people responding in very positive ways. So just let me commend you on that. Um, Again, Wesley seems to almost lead on every question, not only lead in the sense of being the first to respond, but responds quite often and with just other encouraging and informative comments. And so thank you, Wesley, for starting off. And your response on the first question about how Silvito applied communication theory to the artistic and creative endeavors was spot on. I thought it was very good. Courtney Lee was also this week particularly very strong in many of her answers, and she added a couple things. How Sabito incorporated his thinking about how the brain functions into his programs as well, and also how he used tone to make them more effective. And so if you read Wesley's and you read Courtney's, you'll get two really good responses. But actually there was a third that I thought also needed to be mentioned, and this is Jennifer's. And she talks about the 5 models of communication, including Bentley's dramatic communication. Jung, of course, that's Carl Jung, who was the psychiatrist, a friend of Freud's, and who talked about the collective unconscious and how important that is. And by the way, that whole idea of the collective unconscious was taken up by Campbell. And Campbell used it in his discussion of myth in one of his books, A Hero with a Thousand Faces. What kind of heroes do we have in our culture, and the myths that energize culture and our lives. And then even today, people like Vogler, who is a prominent script doctor in Hollywood, continues to use these ideas that all came from Jung to Campbell to Vogler. And in this case, they came to Sabito and how he found and used them. And then, of course, Bandura's learning theory, which is had a very of the current writers, very scholars, very powerful effect on his social learning theory, and we'll revisit that again. And then McLean. And so anyway, read her response. Jennifer St. Louis, all 3 of those were good and useful and brought in different information that I thought was very helpful. On question 2, which we talk about, the 3 characters did Sabito use to embody the EE, the entertainment education message. And here is just a very simple answer I was looking for. The 3 types of characters: the positive role models, the negative role models, and the transitional role models. The transitional role models are, the positive role models, of course, that's what we want people to see and to believe in. There are heroes, there are people that are the leaders. The negative role models are that we want to reject. The transitional role models are the ones that move us from maybe negative to positive and move us, and people who we can identify with in making transitional change. And so they become very important. And we also ask in that question, and many of you brought in many different and useful chapters and articles, rather, on that question. So again, strong question. Those were the ones, and I think Courtney probably had, in my mind, just a real positive answer. Courtney, you also did very well on question 3. Why is Bandura's social learning theory particularly useful in creating and disseminating entertainment education messages? And what she suggests, and of course what the text suggests, is that Bandura broke down the process of observational learning into 4 cognitive sub-processes: attention, retention, production, and motivation. And so those are the ones I wanted you to explore and to discuss, which many of you did, and understand. And so I thought that was very useful. Bandura's model is very useful in many areas, not only here in entertainment education, but in education generally, in communication, and sociology, and many other fields. And so that was very helpful. I thought also Patricia had a very interesting comment to make in her observation of Bandura's social learning theory, where she talks about the messages because it was useful for creating EE messages because it was uses were both vicarious motivations and attentional involvement. And the desire behavioral change depends on 4 factors. Self-efficacy, very important term. You'll see a lot of research done on that. Outcome explorations, aspirations, and then perceived impediments. So very, very helpful. I thought your work was done very well this week. I hope you have a good weekend. Hope you're enjoying. I looked briefly for next week, and you're already next week, meaning what I'll respond to next week, but what you're doing this week, and you're doing great so far. Many of you, a lot of discussion on that. Hope you have a good week. I know this one's short, but I just felt it was very well covered in the discussion. I didn't need to say a whole lot about it. Have a good weekend. See you next week. Bye-bye.